The sound was a death knell played on an anvil of stone. Asterisk thump. Clank. Asterisk each footfall was a promise of pulverization, a rhythmic, inexorable advance that vibrated through the metal floor and up into their very bones. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to seize Kalen, but years of training as a knight, even a disinherited one, forged it into a blade of pure focus.
Back, he hissed, his voice a low command that cut through the oppressive silence. Into the chamber with the lockers. Now!
He didn't need to tell Alara twice. The scholar in her was momentarily silenced by the primal, overriding instinct for survival. They slipped back into the small room, Kalen pressing himself flat against the wall beside the doorway, the cool metal a stark contrast to the sudden heat in his blood. He raised the orb of true sight, its crystalline depths transforming the world into a ghostly tableau of green energy and shimmering heat signatures. Through the orb, the approaching guardian was a monster of myth brought to life. It was a walking furnace, a monolith of seething internal power barely contained by a thick, angular carapace of dark, unadorned metal. The green light of the orb revealed faint, shimmering lines of brighter energy running along its joints: the neck, the broad shoulders, the powerful knees. Weak points? Or merely conduits for its terrifying strength? He couldn't be sure, but they were his only potential targets. The juggernaut filled the corridor. Its head, a solid block of metal with a single, glowing red slit for a sensor, swiveled slowly from side to side, scanning the empty hall. It was methodical, unthinking. A force of nature given metallic form. It paused just outside their doorway, its massive frame so large it almost scraped both walls. For a heart-stopping moment, Kalen was certain its sensor had detected them, a silent predator sniffing the air for the scent of their fear. But it remained still, its internal hum a deep, resonant bass note that seemed to make the very air tremble.
Its core, it burned so brightly, Alara whispered from behind him, her voice barely a breath against the back of his neck. She was peeking over his shoulder, her eyes wide with a mixture of profound terror and utter fascination.
The juggernaut turned its head away and continued its ponderous march down the corridor, its purpose unknown. A patrol route, Kalen realized with a jolt of clarity. It was a warden, not a hunter. It followed a preordained path, blind to anything that did not directly impede it.
This is our chance, Kalen muttered, lowering the orb. The world snapped back into the familiar, dim illumination of Alara's staff. While its back is turned.
Fight it? Alara squeaked, pulling the high collar of her robes tighter as if the very idea was a physical chill. Kalen, did you see the size of it? My fire spells would be like throwing pebbles at a fortress wall.
We're not going to fight it in the hallway, he countered, his mind racing, piecing together a desperate strategy. We need space. And we need to get past it. It came from deeper in. Whatever it's guarding is where we need to go.
He gestured with the strange light-casting weapon down the corridor in the direction they had come from. We lure it back towards the larger concourse we passed. There, we'll have room to maneuver.
Lure it, she repeated, aghast. And how, precisely, do you propose we gain the attention of a deaf, unthinking mountain of metal?
Kalen's lips thinned into a grim line. He raised the lightcaster, took a deep breath to steady his hand, and aimed for the center of the Guardian's broad back. He squeezed the metal trigger. A lance of pure crimson energy erupted from the weapon, searing through the darkness and striking the Juggernaut's shoulder plate. The impact was spectacular. It didn't pierce the armor, but it exploded in a shower of brilliant scarlet sparks with a deafening crack that echoed like thunder through the confined space. The Juggernaut staggered, its heavy stride broken for the first time. It stopped. Slowly, with a grinding protest of ancient, powerful mechanisms, the monolithic guardian began to turn. Its single red sensor eye, which had been a passive, sweeping light, now glowed with a focused, malevolent intensity. It locked onto their position. The low hum of its core escalated into a high-pitched, furious whine, The sound of a hornet's nest stirred to rage.
I believe, Kalen said, a grim satisfaction in his voice, that we now have its undivided attention. Run!
He didn't wait for a reply, spinning on his heel and sprinting down the corridor. Elara, her initial shock giving way to a surge of adrenaline, followed close behind, her staff's light bobbing frantically in the dark. Behind them, the rhythmic asterisk thump. Clank. Asterisk was replaced by a ground-shaking asterisk crash. 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 Asterisk. The juggernaut had abandoned its measured patrol. It was now charging, each footfall a seismic event that threatened to shake the very walls apart. They burst out of the narrow service tunnel and into the wider concourse they had traversed earlier. The space felt liberatingly vast, a battlefield worthy of the beast they had unleashed.
Here! Kalen yelled, skidding to a halt behind a thick metal support pillar that rose from floor to ceiling. Elara, to my left. Distract it!
The juggernaut smashed through the smaller corridor's archway, tearing metal and synthetic stone as if it were parchment. It stood there for a moment, a behemoth framed in the wreckage of its own making, its red eye sweeping the cavernous space before locking onto the brightest point of light, Elara's glowing staff. With another metallic roar that was more a shriek of tortured machinery, it charged.
By the ever-shining stars, Elara breathed. She instinctively threw up her hands, chanting a hurried incantation, her voice sharp and clear despite the danger. Asterisk glacis via, asterisk.
The floor in front of the charging juggernaut instantly frosted over, a 20-foot stretch of smooth, unnatural ice spreading from the point of her staff. The Guardian, built for traction and overwhelming power, not for finesse, hit the slick surface at full speed. Its massive metal feet slid out from under it, and for a glorious, almost comical moment, the unstoppable force was rendered helpless. It windmilled its enormous arms, struggling for balance, before crashing onto its side with a cataclysmic shriek of grinding metal that made Kalen's ears ring.
Now! Elara screamed, her voice triumphant.
Kalen was already moving. He darted out from behind the pillar, the orb of true sight pressed to his eye. The fall had exposed the Guardian's flank and, more importantly, the glowing green lines around the joint where its leg met its hip. He raised the light caster, aimed for the nexus of those lines, and fired. FZZZ crack. The crimson beam struck true. This time, it didn't just spark. It bit into the weaker joint, and a plume of black, oily smoke hissed from the wound. The juggernaut bellowed, a sound of grating metal and static discharge, and slammed a fist into the ground, trying to push itself up. It was faster than Kalen had anticipated. It was already rising, one leg struggling to find purchase on the ice. He fired again, a second bolt of red light striking the same spot, widening the gash and causing more noxious smoke to pour out. The Guardian, ignoring Kalen, focused its rage on the source of its indignity. Its single eye fixed on Elara. Its left arm, ending in a crushing piston as wide as a barrel, drew back. Elara, her spell complete, had no time to react, no time to even gasp. The piston fist shot forward with the force of a battering ram, aimed directly at her chest. Kalen's heart leaped into his throat. But just as the fist was about to connect, a faint, hexagonal pattern of blue light flickered into existence around Elara. The bracer. The metal fist slammed into the translucent shield with a deafening boom. The shield flared violently, the air warping around it as it absorbed the impossible force, but it held. Elara was thrown backward by the sheer kinetic energy of the blow, tumbling onto the floor in an undignified heap, but she was, miraculously, unharmed.
My robes, she cried out, scrambling to her feet, her voice a mixture of indignation and relief. She brushed frantically at the dust now soiling the fine blue fabric, more outraged by the grime than the near-death experience.
The juggernaut, its attack thwarted, was momentarily confused by the shimmering barrier. It was this moment of hesitation Kalen needed. He had only a few shots left, He could feel the weapon growing lighter in his hand, its internal power fading. He had to end this.
Ilara, its chest, he yelled, seeing his chance through the orb. Its power source. Hit it with everything you have.
In the center of the Juggernaut's torso, the orb revealed the brightest energy signature of all the captured star Ilara had seen. A small, vertical slit, barely wider than a hand, glowed with intense, almost unbearable heat. A ventilation port, perhaps?
Ilara needed no more encouragement. Her brush with Oblivion had stoked the fires of her anger. Her hands wove an intricate pattern in the air, her voice ringing with arcane power. Fulminis ictus, *.
A bolt of raw, jagged lightning, far more potent than any she had summoned before, leaped from her outstretched fingers. It did not strike the Juggernaut's chest, it streaked toward the ceiling. Kalen watched, confused for a split second, before he saw her target, a massive power conduit running along the ceiling, one of the main arteries of this entire complex, which the orb had shown him earlier. The lightning struck the conduit. The result was instantaneous and catastrophic. The conduit exploded in a waterfall of brilliant blue-white sparks, and a thick, writhing cable, spitting raw energy, dropped from the ceiling. It fell directly onto the Juggernaut's head and shoulders. The Guardian seized up, convulsing violently as untold volts of the Ancient's power coursed through its chassis. Its red eye flickered and died. The angry whine of its core sputtered into a discordant groan. It was stunned, helpless, trapped in an agonizing cage of arcing electricity. This was the final opening. Kalen ran forward, closing the distance until he was nearly at the Juggernaut's feet, the air thick with the smell of ozone. He raised the light caster one last time, aiming not at a joint, but directly at the glowing, vertical heat vent in its chest. He channeled every ounce of his focus, held his breath, and squeezed the trigger. The last charge of the weapon fired. The crimson beam, slender and precise, lanced through the storm of blue sparks and plunged directly into the vent. For a moment, there was only silence. The arcing energy from the broken cable died down. The Juggernaut stood frozen. Then, a low groan emanated from deep within its chest. The light from the vent flared, changing from angry red to a blinding white. A high-pitched keen pierced the air, growing in intensity until it was unbearable.
Get down! Kalen roared, tackling Ilara and pulling her behind the relative safety of the pillar just as the world erupted.
The Juggernaut exploded. Not in a ball of fire, but in a wave of concussive force and a shower of metal shrapnel. The armored plates of its torso blew outward, and its monolithic frame collapsed into a heap of smoking, ruined machinery. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the faint crackle of the severed power cable and the ringing in their ears. Slowly, Kalen rose to his feet, pulling a shaken but unharmed Ilara up with him. He surveyed the wreckage. The Juggernaut was utterly destroyed, a mountain of scrap metal.
Well, he said, his voice raspy. He nudged a piece of twisted armor with his boot. They can be broken.
He looked down at the light caster in his hand. It felt inert, its ruby lens dark. But this cannot. He gave the useless weapon a frustrated shake.
Ilara, however, was already moving towards the wreckage, her fear once again eclipsed by her insatiable curiosity. Look, she said, her voice filled with wonder as she pointed.
In the center of the Juggernaut's ruined chest cavity, nestled amongst severed wires and melted components, was an object. It was a perfect, obsidian black cube, identical to the one Kalen had in his satchel, but this one pulsed with a soft, internal blue light, humming with contained power. It was fully charged. Kalen's eyes lit up. He carefully retrieved the cube from the smoldering wreckage. It was warm to the touch. He ejected the spent, dead cube from the light caster's grip and slotted the new one in. The weapon immediately came to life, its internal mechanisms humming with renewed energy, its lens glowing a faint crimson once more.
A heart of obsidian, Alara murmured, looking at the dead cube in Kalen's hand before gesturing to the new one. It seems these guardians run on the same power source as your Sunreaver.
Kalen nodded, a sense of grim relief washing over him. Sunreaver. He liked the sound of that. He now had a full charge, and more importantly, a potential way to replenish it. They were not entirely without hope.
Let's see what it was so determined to protect.
They proceeded down the corridor the Juggernaut had emerged from, their steps cautious. The passage ended not at a door, but at a grand archway that opened into a vast, dark chamber. As Alara's staff light swept across the room, it revealed a sight that made even Kalen stop and stare. It was a command center. A bridge. At the far end, a colossal sheet of the same unblemished green glass they'd seen in the observation deck looked out into the absolute blackness of the deep earth. Before it sat two high-backed, throne-like chairs facing the void. The chairs were flanked by sloping consoles covered in dark, silent tablets and inert crystals. The entire room was arranged with a stark, commanding geometry. This was a place of power, of observation, of control. But it was what was projected in the air above a circular platform in the center of the room that held their gaze. A faint, holographic image shimmered there, a three-dimensional, rotating map of the heavens. It was a star chart, but unlike any they had ever seen. It showed familiar constellations, the celestial serpent, the griffin, the WYRM, but it also showed glowing lines and vectors connecting them, luminous pathways arcing between the stars. It was not a map for astrologers or priests. It was a map for travelers.
They didn't just look at the stars, Alara whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of revelation. She stepped forward, her hand outstretched as if to touch the ghostly light, her face bathed in its ethereal glow. They sailed them.